It's great to have you with us from wherever you're tuning in from. For more information about Elevate Church or to contact us, head to our website elevatechurch.me and take us wherever you go by downloading our Elevate Church AU app. We hope this message inspires and helps you to take your next steps in your journey.
Today's week 2 of a series we launched last week called What Are You Expecting? And we've decided for the 5 weeks of this series, we're going to drill into one sentence, one specific thing that God said. And the context of this specific thing that God said is that his people, the nation of Israel, they'd been released from centuries of captivity and slavery under the Egyptians. They had been promised a land that they would enter into, and it was glorious, and they would be free, and there was big grapes and milk and honey, and it was fantastic. But they had to go on a journey to get from where they were being released from and enter into this land that God had promised them. And the journey, it happened in a desert, was taking longer than they expected. That there was things that were happening that they didn't kind of think that if they were God, you know, like you've never played this game before. If I was God, I would do it this way. You know, like, God, come on, really? What are you doing? You sure you're qualified? And so they were getting discouraged. They were losing hope. They were ratcheting down their expectations in God. And God inserted himself into the narrative. And he declared something about who he is to them. Because here's the thing. When you understand who somebody is, like when you pop the bonnet and you understand who somebody is, that actually goes a long way to explain what somebody does. There's a saying, hurt people hurt people. So when you see downstream someone walking around hurting other people, you can almost always look upstream and find that that person has been hurt and hasn't actually resolved that hurt. Who they are actually informs what they do. If somebody is lazy, then that actually explains what they do, or if lazy explains what they don't do. And then that's on a positive front as well. Who somebody is, it will explain what they do. And because if you understand who somebody is, you can then expect them to do things that are in line with their character, are in line with who they are. And so God's people were losing hope, getting discouraged, and God, he's like, hey, listen, let me either remind you or let me inform you who I really am. Because if you know who I really am, then you can expect things that are in line with who I really am. So God, when got in Moses was leading them at the time, leading the people, got in Moses' face and said this to Moses on behalf and for the people that they were leading. Yahweh, this is God speaking, the Lord, hello, the God of, and he declares 5 truths about himself. The God of compassion and mercy. I am slow to anger, and I'm filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. These 5 big truths of who God is. And last week we drilled into the first one, that God is a God of compassion and what that means, and that we can expect God's compassion. Compassion is not a weak word. It's not a there. It's somebody who is willing to get involved in our narrative and actually ultimately turn things around if that's what we need from him, because he's for us, not against us. Now, 20 years ago, I was reading my Bible. I've read it since as well, but this particular time, about 20 years ago, I'm reading my Bible. And I remember every now and then you're reading your Bible, and it might be something you're reading for the first time. It might be something you're reading that you've read before, but God, and he says his word is alive, okay? So when you read your Bible, you can expect that some things are just going to leap off the page and smack you right between the eyes, or in this case, literally just about knock me off my seat. I'm reading early accounts of creation around the time of a guy named Noah, but he hadn't appeared into the narrative just yet. In Genesis chapter 6, I'm reading God's people, again, had chosen to kind of walk away from God. Seems to be a little bit of a pattern. They decided to go their own way, make themselves the center of their universe, make their own ambitions and their own plans the most important part of it. And It was pretty drastic. And the reason I know it's pretty drastic is when you're reading that, God got to a point where he decided his best play was to destroy everybody and everything and start from scratch. God decided he was going to do people version 2.0. Like 1.0 is an epic fail. These people they're so far gone, they can't even be redeemed. They can't even be rescued. They can't even be repaired. So I'm just going to wipe them out. And I'm going to do what I did the first time. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to start from scratch. Now, does that sound pretty dramatic? Does that sound like somebody who's kind of lost their patience with how things are going? Well, this is exactly how it was. And then I read these 7 words, just about knocked me off my seat. But Noah found favor with the Lord. And spoiler, on this basis alone, God spared Noah and his family and a few animals from ultimately being destroyed. Like, Noah got a little bit more than a free kick here. He literally got the only ticket to continue. And then God says to Noah something like completely insane. He says, I want you to build a boat 140 meters long, about 500 feet long. Bit bigger than an AFL ground in length. And that's insane. And it's insane for at least 2 reasons. Number one, Noah wasn't a builder. If you're going to get somebody to build a big boat, probably choose a boat builder. No, chose Noah. No experience, no qualifications. I mean, I confessed last week having failed assembling, not building, assembling an IKEA bookcase. It's like God saying to me, yeah, you're the best candidate for the job. I'd be like, no, God, you have got no clue. So he asks Noah, not a builder, to build a boat 140 meters long. And get this, it wasn't even raining. How do you explain that to your neighbors when you get that project underway? When you're halfway through, neighbors are walking by, morning, Noah, building a big boat, I see. Yep. It's dry docked in a dry land. Absolutely nuts. Well, more on that later. Again, spoiler, Noah said yes. So God declares himself the God of compassion and mercy. Now, this word mercy can be used interchangeably with a couple of other words, not entirely overlapping, but largely overlapping. Mercy is often used interchangeably with the word grace, and is often used interchangeably with the word favor. So I want to actually drill into this word favor this morning. So let me start by defining terms. In favor, as many English words can be, you can define it several ways. I'm going to just keep it real simple. And to define favor as to endorse, okay? Again, there are other definitions. If you've got your Merriam-Webster's, you can look up, you'll find some additional. But to keep it super simple, favor in the context I'm going to talk about this morning means to endorse. And the kind of idea is like if you write a book, towards the end of the writing process, you would typically be looking for somebody to write the foreword. And when they've written the foreword, you include that at the early part of your book, and you put their name on the cover as well. So it's X book written by you and foreword by such and such. Well, the person you choose to write the foreword would ideally be somebody that's more well-known than you, would ideally be somebody that's got more credibility than you, ideally probably somebody that's more of an expert in the field than you are, or maybe they've authored books and they've sold more than you've sold. And the hope is that by them writing the foreword and you bragging about that they thought your book was worth putting their name on, that will actually give your book a bit of a leg up, would actually give you an endorsement to see your book go further, faster. Another example, Oprah Winfrey, perhaps you heard of her, Book of the Month Club. She would take a book that she's read or one of her assistants has read, and each month she would recommend that book. Now, without Oprah's endorsement, probably the book's going to sell a couple of thousand copies, give or take. But let me tell you what happens when Oprah gives her endorsement is that book now is selling in the hundreds of thousands of copies, and you'll see it listed in the New York Times bestsellers list simply because Oprah did that author a favor and gave the book and the author her endorsement. So I want to talk today about that we as Jesus followers can expect God's favor. Now, this is one of my favorite topics, and I've only ever preached this topic once in over 20 years of preaching. And the reason I've only ever preached it once is because I have seen people take this topic and this concept and this principle and get so wonked out about it that it's like, no. And so I've kind of stayed way away back from the water's edge on this. But today, we're going in, people. We're taking a deep dive. But before I do, let me tell you some of the wonky things and some of the reasons that I've been reluctant in over 20 years to preach this, except for once, and today, second time. Is a misunderstanding that some people have that God's love and God's favor are the same thing. And they're not. God's love is something that's given to us unconditionally. God's love is something that's given to us not because of what we've done, but in fact, often despite what we've done. That God gives it to us. We didn't earn it, Frankie. Deserve it, Frankie. That's the song you're listening to. God give it to us, and not only has given it to us, we've got it for keeps. Okay, that's God's love. God's favor is something different, and actually God's favor, there's some upstream things, or I'm going to talk about one in particular later on, that we can do to actually position us to better receive God's favor. So these are two different things. Another thing that people get wonky on is that when you start talking about God's favor, that he's going to give you an endorsement, he's going to give you a leg up, he's going to give you some assistance, that from that moment forwards, only good things will happen to you. You'll never get sick. Your kids will never misbehave. You'll never ever be disappointed again. Fake news, people. Can we just agree on that? And the third thing, and this I got a longer list than this, I'll just give you the top three, is people thinking that God's favor, that the purpose behind God's favor is that so that we can get more, bigger, shinier, newer, faster. And by the way, sometimes God's favor plays out in those things. But those aren't the purpose and the reason God might give us his favor. In fact, the reason that God gives us his favor is so that we can fulfill our purpose better. Because the things that God's calling us to do individually and corporately, we can't do on our own. We're going to need some assistance. And God says, yeah, I'm willing to give you some assistance. But here's the thing. When God gives us his assistance, when he endorses us, when he gives us his favor, it's ultimately then not just to achieve the purpose he's called us to, it's ultimately then to bring him glory. Because when God gives us his favor, we sit there and we say, can't explain it. And no, can't explain it. But I know that God he's given me a leg up. I know God has endorsed us. I know that, and here's the thing. People don't always agree with what you say, but they can't dispute what they see. And so when they see you in your life experiencing God's favor, you can't dispute that. So God gets the glory. What favor might look like in your life. I'm going to whet your appetite. You ready? God's favor might cause doors to open that you can't open. Might cause good breaks to come your way. Might cause the right people to come your way. Might cause the business deal that you bid for among many other contractors to be given to you. Might cause you to get the promotion that you weren't even next in line for. And it's often said that one touch of God's favor is worth years of your labor. Now, the labor is important. It's like, well, in that case, I'll just sit around on a hammock and wait for God's favor to swoop on in. No. No, you'll find out in a second. That is probably the opposite thing that we're supposed to do. But you can't explain it and you can't take credit for it. But boy, when it happens, it's inexplicable and it's good. So, back to my 20 years ago, reading the Bible, getting nearly knocked off my seat. But Noah, remember God's about to destroy everyone and everything, do-over, Earth 2.0. But Noah found favor with the Lord. So I read that, and I'm immediately like, why Noah? I like it. If I was, I'd rather be Noah than all the other clowns. And here's the thing, favor leaves clues. When you see somebody experiencing God's favor in a situation, a circumstance, or a season of their life, there's always clues upstream. And the smart play, and I had one of these conversations this week with someone who's experienced, or their family is experiencing God's favor. My first question to them is, tell me what you were doing before this season. Tell me what you were doing in the last season. Tell me what you did, what you went through, how you positioned yourself, because you didn't just wake up and mysteriously experience God's favor, because that's not how it works. There's always clues upstream, and they explained some of their upstream stuff, and I went, yeah, sounds about right. Made some notes for myself. Because favor leaves clues, and the same is true for Noah. So Noah found favor with the Lord and not only got spared, but got given this incredible purpose, so phenomenal, but also so beyond him that he needed God's favor to continually be a thing. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be reading about him in history today. Well, here's a couple of clues. The very next verse, after learning that Noah found favor with the Lord and got spared, the very next verse, the very next thing that's recorded in history. This is the account of Noah and his family. Here's two clues. One, Noah was a righteous man, which means he did the right thing. He always asked God, what do you want me to do in this situation? The reason the rest of the clowns are getting wiped out is because they were always asking the question, what's the right thing for me? Whereas Noah would ask a different question, God, what's the right thing that you want me to do? So Noah was a righteous man. Listen, parents, you know this. If your kid is continually asking you as the parent, what do you want me to do? That kid's due for some treats. That kid's due for some rewards. If that kid's just, instead of saying, hey, Mama, Papa, tell me what you want me to do and how you want me to do it, and you go, yeah, and then they go and do it, fantastic. If instead that kid's like, screw you, Mom, screw you, you'd be like, okay, bed early, no TV. It's like, yeah, duh. So Noah was a righteous man. There's a clue. The only, blameless person living on earth at the time. And secondly, he walked in close fellowship with God at a time where one of the reasons God wanted to wipe everyone out is because they walked away from God. So Noah did the opposite. He prioritized his relationship with God on a daily basis. And then scroll down, verse 22. Here's another clue, and this is the one I want to drill into. So Noah, God's just explained the boat, and he gave very specific instructions. You know, people say, I want to be led by the Spirit. Yeah, okay, no. There's a part of it, but God often gives a very specific framework, including saying, I want you to build a boat 140 meters long. Not just anything, a tinny, a kayak. No, it's like very specific. He outlined the materials, okay. And this is what Noah did. Remember, unqualified builder. He's putting this thing together on his front yard. That's probably, well, who knows? And made no sense. And this is what was said. So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Obedience. So I want to just in the 11 minutes and 37 seconds we have remaining, Frank, don't look. I want to zoom in on this piece, this clue, this upstream clue around obedience. So if you have your Bible app or your Bible with your smartphone torch ready, Ash, Rex, pop it open to Luke chapter 16. I'm going to take it from the New International Version. Luke chapter 16. Now, Luke was he wasn't actually one of Jesus' handpicked followers. He was actually a medical doctor at the time. And in the early days of the early church was growing. Most of it was growing because of the verbal stories being passed around of Jesus, what he did, how he rose from the dead, the miracles he performed, the things he taught. And Luke decided he was going to kind of down the stethoscope and pick up the quill and start to write some of this down. First of all, just to see if it was actually true, like a little bit of investigative journalism. But secondly, if it is true, this stuff needs to be preserved and then needs to be disseminated. And so he went around interviewing eyewitnesses, people who had been there when Jesus had taught, people who'd been there when Jesus had healed, people that were there when Jesus appeared, having been, killed a few days ahead. And wrote this. And this is one of the things that Luke recorded that Jesus taught. Now, 2 series ago, we taught a series called Chasing Purpose. And the big idea in that series is that there are things that God calls all Jesus followers to do. And we call that God's general purpose. That's like the one size fits all. And I use the metaphor of a freeway. Like there's a freeway, but plenty of lanes on it, that we're all meant to get on. And then when we're on it, traveling together, God will also give us some specific instructions that talk more to the lane that we're meant to get into. That's not the same lane as everyone else. Like not everyone else is going to be called to build a 140-meter boat. That was Noah being given a specific purpose, but Noah was living in God's general purpose: obedience, fellowship, righteousness. So there's some things that Jesus specifically told people to do when he was on earth, and not all of them said yes, by the way. So it's not just you and your kids. He also taught some stuff that's for everyone. These are all Jesus followers. I want you to do these things. So I want to just drop us into a slice of some of what Jesus put in for all his followers to be obedient in. And this is in Luke chapter 16. I'm going to drop us into verse 10. Jesus said, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." Here we've got a clue that God hands out his favor based in no small part on whether we are worthy of being trusted with that. And that just makes sense. God doesn't waste resources. If you can't be trusted, why would God give it to you? Because you're going to waste it, and therefore God's being wasteful. So he's looking for people who won't waste resources. And one of the clues that Jesus points out is if you can be trusted with very little, then it's more likely that you can be trusted with much. And let me get this straight. I know what you're thinking. Yep, I know what you're thinking. We all want the much. We all want the much to be our starting point. Boy, much sounds better than little. In fact, much sounds better than very little, right? But Jesus said we don't start with the much, we start with the very little. And God's looking for how we handle the very little. That's a clue to how we may or may not be worthy and be trustworthy in handling the very much. So if you've only got very little, don't underestimate what God might do with that. Don't, it's not much, or it's only, I'm leading an Elevate group, but it's only 3 people, so, I won't even put much energy in. I'm in a course of study, and it's not a very popular one, so look, if I pass, fail, doesn't really matter. I'm in a job that I'm so far down the food chain, I'm not even sure I appear on the organizational chart, so, I'll just do a half-baked job, who cares? And Jesus is saying, no, much comes after very little. And how we handle very little is often the gateway to being entrusted with much. Another church I heard years ago, look, sometimes church leaders tell each other stories because, who else are you going to tell, right? And so this story was told about a particular church that one of the team members in a particular team, they were overheard saying, look, I've got all these great ideas that are going to make this team so much more effective, but I'm going to hold back on sharing them until I become the leader of the team. And then when I become the leader of the team, I'm just going to break out and dazzle everyone with my great ideas. Well, if you're a leader of a church, you've got this principle on lock. Because you don't give the keys to somebody who's not proving themselves to be trusted with very little. So it should come as no surprise to you that that story didn't end well for the one that was holding back on the best ideas. If they put them up, maybe they could have been trusted with more. Then Jesus said, if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, that's money, people, who will trust you with true riches? And as Jesus followers, it would be so easy for us to say, oh, I don't really care about money. I'm not really interested. I don't really pay much attention. I don't know where it goes. You know, someone pays me and I just kind of, and look, sometimes I have it left at the end of the week. Sometimes I don't. I don't even know. Budget? What's the budget? Plan? Come on, are you kidding me? I don't even know. I don't even care. I'm interested in the true riches. I'm interested in things of the kingdom. They're far more important. And Jesus says, heck yeah, they are. And one of the ways that I know you can be entrusted with the stuff that's more important is how you actually manage the stuff that's less important. Money. It's a game-changing thought right there, right? So our next series, we're going to teach on money. It's called Keep the Change. And we do this once a year. And by the way, it's not just teaching on giving, although week 3, it will be. It's teaching on how we do this, how we are trustworthy in handling worldly wealth. Some people are willing and not able, so let's learn to be better. Take your willingness to handle worldly wealth and add some skills to the equation. If you're not willing, maybe we can help you grow an appetite for handling worldly wealth that would actually see God bestow his favor, which is being trusted with true riches. And then this one, Jesus said, if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? And I've got 2 examples. And they both involve guys named Steve. The first one, this is about 15 years ago, one of my buddies, Steve, he was living in a rental property in Como, rental property. And I saw him, around about one day. Oh, how's it going? What'd you do on the weekend? There's a classic Aussie question. What'd you do on the weekend? Is I put retic in, reticulation in my property. And I'm like, Steve, don't you live in a rental? He's like, yes, I do. I'm like, so did the owner, the landlord, did they pay you to put the retic in? No, I just did it in my own time. I'm like, okay. And did they supply the materials? No, I bought them all myself. Okay, you going to invoice them or ask for discount on next month's rent? He goes, no. And he quoted this to me. He said, I want my next move in my life to be able to own my own house. So I'm going to take, you're allowed to quote Bible verses to me. I'm not going to think that you're preaching. I'm a preacher. I'll preach right back at you. He said, Jesus said, and I didn't go, oh, here we go. I'm leaning in. He said, if you're not trustworthy with what someone else is, who would give you something of your own? So I'm going to treat that house that I rent as if it's my own house, trusting that God will take that and see that I can be promoted, I can be endorsed, I can be given a leg up to own my own property. And hey presto, within a period of time, his next move was to own his own property. And I never forgot that. Another story also involves Steve. A friend of mine, Steve, started working as a mechanic, apprentice mechanic, age 18, at one of Australia's largest car dealerships. Now, if you're local here in Perth, it's called John Hughes. If you're listening by podcast, it's called Ginormous. And he started as a mechanic, 18-year-old, out of school, on the tools. By the time he was in his 30s, he was the company director of the entire group. John Hughes, who owned the company, didn't run the company. He ran the company in his 30s on behalf of the group. And hey, Favour leaves clues. So I asked him, tell me some of the stuff upstream that's going to explain the favour you're experiencing downstream. That's the smart question to ask people. Not to be jealous, not to think it couldn't happen to you. Tell me some of the things. And he said, every day when I drive to work, now I'm going to get a bit Bible-y on you, but I'll explain it. He says to me, every day when I drive to work, I pray for Joseph's anointing to be on my life. Now, I understand that doesn't make sense in normal English. Very quickly, Joseph, in history, on 2 separate occasions, was put in charge of things that he didn't own. First demonstration, he was put in prison, and within a period of time, he was put in charge of running the prison whilst he was still a prisoner. And then once he got released from prison, he was appointed, not the next day, but in a very short period of time, he was appointed the prime minister to run Egypt on behalf of the Pharaoh. So he didn't own the prison. He wasn't the head of Egypt when he was appointed prime minister, but he tackled those responsibilities as if he was the chief of the prison, as if he was the Pharaoh of the country. And God knew that he wouldn't have promoted him in the first place if he hadn't demonstrated some of these characteristics. So my buddy Steve said, I pray on my way to work, and then I try to act it out every day. I'm going to work here, in whatever position on the org chart that I'm on, I'm going to work in this job as if I actually own the business. And he retired in his early 40s, and I can't probably personally tell you more than that, but there's plenty more to that story. So this is true in your workplace, even if you're not the owner, this can play out. This is true in a team, even if you're not the leader. You say to the leader, I want to be a contributing team member. You say to the leader, how do you want me to best contribute? You want to promote people? Look for people who say to you, what's the role? And give me some clues on how you want me to do it. And then you go away and exceed their expectations. That's what this looks like. If you're looking at maybe property ownership of your own and you're currently in a rental and you know you think it's a good day if you've just barely scraped through a rental inspection, this might speak to you to treat that house. I've said this to some of our younger people. I'm not going to put a number on that. But when I've stepped into their cars and I've thought to myself, I need a hazmat suit in here. And I've said, do you expect me to like physically get in this car? It's not going to happen. I'll get an Uber and I'll meet you there. And they're like, what? I go, this is disgusting. Oh, yeah, but when I get a nice car, I'm going to look after that. I'm like, no, you're not. You're either not going to get a nice car or you're going to get a nice car and you're going to treat this like you treat like. And I'm not being harsh on them. I'm quoting this to them. This is a Jesus principle, and it's stuff that God gives us clues that if we do these sorts of things, and they're not about being legal and they're not about being, it's so burdensome. It's like, man, I love this. Who wouldn't want this? And if we can get onto this, again, we don't manufacture God's favor. Well, I can't put a timeline on it. I can't tell you how it's going to happen. You can't come and ask for your money back from me because I told you that it's not about me. It's not even about you, though we can play a part in it. And in playing our part, and oh boy, and obey because it's God, period. Right? If he then endorses us and gives us a leg up and shows us favor, well, that's just a bonus, right? But he actually says that's something that we can expect. We good? You all are very quiet this morning. Is this because it's so profound? Yeah, well, that's of course. I mean, I don't even know why I bothered asking. I knew that was the reason. Hey, next week, we get our good friend Steve Hall preaching. He's going to be preaching on expect God's patience, where God says, I'm slow to anger. In my 20s, I was not slow to anger. I was not a very nice person to be around or married to, which I wasn't in my 20s, thank God. So Steve's going to preach on that. So be here, bring someone, and we're going to continue just to really get more and more clarity on who God says He is.
We really hope you got a lot out of this message. If you live in the Perth area, we'd love for you to join one of our live experiences. For times and directions, as well as information, head to our website, elevatechurch.me. For those of you beyond the Perth area, we'd love for you to connect with our online experience, which premieres every Sunday via YouTube and Facebook Live, and on demand immediately after. And to partner with us to reach more people by giving financially, head to our website, elevatechurch.me, and also download our Elevate Church AU app.